August 18th at 7:30 a.m. We will start the first item, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, as we begin the committee meeting, if you have a cell phone, if you can put that on vibrate or off, we would appreciate that. Roll call attendance, please.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Fleece?
Present.
Maxbauer?
Here.
Thomas?
Here.
Richardson?
Here.
Stepka?
Here.
Friend? Here. Hooper?
Here.
Inman?
Here. All right, we're all here. Third item is the approval of the minutes for the July 21st meeting. We can get a motion to...
So moved.
Moved by Friend, support by, who is that? Commissioner Stepka, to approve the minutes of July 21st. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, this is the first public comment that we have in our agenda this morning. Does any member of the public wish to address the Ways and Means Committee? Hearing none, we will close the first public comment. Now we will move on to the approval of the agenda. Need a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Mr. Chairman, I'd move to approve the agenda as provided. Support.
Right. Moved by Commissioner Wheelock, supported by Commissioner Fleece. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Next item is special order of business, and I believe we have none this morning. So we will move on with the consent calendar. If the clerk could read the consent calendar, please.
The purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public may ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed therefrom and placed elsewhere on the agenda for full discussion. Such requests will be automatically respected. If any item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted, receive and file or approval, is approved by a single committee action adopting the consent calendar. A, receive and file. Number 1, Child Care Fund. Number 2, Consumer Price Index information. B, approve. Number 1, County Local Centrex Service and Garfield Road Prime Rate Circuit Contract Renewals. Number 2, appropriation requests.
All right, the consent calendar has been read. Has any member of the public wish to pull any of the items? Does any of the commissioners wish to pull any of the items?
B1.
Richardson, B1. Okay.
Motion to approve the consent calendar with the exception of B1.
Second.
All right, moved by Commissioner Friend, second by Commissioner Richardson to approve the consent calendar with the exception of item B1. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Fleece?
Yes.
Maxbauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes, ma'am.
Inman?
Yes. All right, consent calendar is approved. Moving on to item number 8, department action items. We have today, the first item is facilities. Kind of a status report of where we're at with the governmental stairs. Danny, if you can come up and get yourself introduced, if you could.
Good morning. Danny Brown, Facilities Director, Grand Traverse County. Well, I hate being here again over this issue, but here I am again.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Through the bidding process and actually even through the PO process that Dennis signed, when I sent it to Hallmark Construction, they sent it, they asked for a special meeting with me to go over the numbers. And lo and behold, they did not bid a portion of this sidewalk replacement and the curb and gutter, which was about $6,500 that they left out of the bid. So I got with Dennis and we talked about it and said, we're going to have to disqualify their bid, plain and simple, and just go to the next bidder. So that's what we did. And my recommendation would be to disqualify Hallmark Construction for not following the bid directions and the specifications, accept the bid for 56.8 from Cole Incorporated. Now, I did talk to them about that very item, and they had included it in their bid and everybody else. For the replacement of the stairway and upper level sidewalk, curb and gutter, and installation of the Ray Kim electromat system as specified in the original bid request, and authorize facilities management to purchase the electrical supplies for the connection and operation of the Ray Kim electromat system. Total expenditures not to exceed $4,500.
All right, any questions from the commission? Commissioner Fleece?
Danny, Cole Incorporated, is that Robert T. Cole?
Yes.
Incorporated?
Mhm.
Mr. Chairman, I think I would recluse myself, as they're a customer of mine, and the last month I've done some business with them, and
Okay.
I just don't want the appearance of impropriety or anybody to be able to say that.
Okay. Anybody? Commissioner Richardson?
I mean, was it clear that Hallmark had not bid that upper sidewalk? I mean, there was no way you could say, well, you bid it, and
No, we tried that. We
You went down that road.
no, we did. What happened was, and what they did is they modified the bid form, basically. The bid form is set up in 2 pages, and at the bottom, they put in their prices. On the bottom of the second page, they put in a price for the repairing the stairs, and then a price for the heating. And they did that, but then up at the top of the page, they typed in, we just missed it, they typed in, there was no, they shouldn't have, but they typed in alternate to sidewalk replacement, $6,500. And so we looked at the bottom and said, everything's in order, they filled out the form, but in fact, they had not taken into account, and I had Danny call the owner twice to say, are you absolutely sure you cannot do this for the 48.5, because that was your bid? And they said, no, they couldn't, and so that's when we verified with the second bidder that we could, or they could, excuse me.
All right, any other questions?
I just want to point out that, part of this will be shared by the city, of course. They share the facilities, capital improvements with us, and it's about 25%, 26%.
Commissioner Wheelock?
Well, as, I've told you before, I've bid the railings to this project to 4 of the 6 contractors that bid, so I won't be voting. One thing that I would note, if I add the $6,500 to their base bid, I'm still lower than Cole's bid,
That's true.
Yep, that is true, but
so
they did not meet the specifications.
I
and so
understand that, and
technically
that would be the only comment that I'd make.
It's a fair
And to
comment.
be honest with you, I bid the rails to both Hallmark and Cole, and along with others, so it's not,
Yeah, we
It's the extent
took
of my
that,
discussion.
we always take that into account, but, they just were not responsive to the bid, and so therefore they have to be disqualified.
Question, Danny, is it a situation where it was that they knew that they weren't doing the complete bid, or is it a situation where it was they're requesting that we go out for rebid so they can complete it?
I don't think it was that, it was the latter.
Latter?
Of the rebid, I don't think so.
They understood the fact.
They understood
that,
it.
All right.
that it was
Yeah.
different.
All right, do we have a recommendation from the committee? Commissioner Max Bauer.
I would move to accept the $56,800 bid from Cole for replacement of the stairway, upper-level sidewalk, curb and gutter, and installation of the Raychem electromelt system as specified in the original bid request.
support.
Moved by Commissioner Max Bauer, supported by Commissioner Richardson, to move forward with the recommendation for Cole Inc. Discussion? Commissioner Hooper.
Is there still a chance that this can be done this year?
I'm going to try my best.
Yeah,
We gotta
that's
get
why,
this done.
instead of waiting and bringing it through the regular committee next month, Danny asked if we could bring it today so that we would be done in time to get this thing under construction right away, and so that's the intent.
You got lots of time.
I would truly like to get it behind me.
Yeah.
Tell you the truth.
Nothing better than frozen time.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Max Bauer.
Danny, I asked you this question last time, I'm going to ask it again. If we do not fix these stairs, what is the probability that the rest of the stairway will crumble?
Oh, there's a good possibility. Actually, it's starting to check up right now.
Okay, thank you.
We could fix them without the electromelt system, right?
Yes. Mhm.
Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Max Bauer?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
No.
Hooper?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Abstain, please.
Please?
Abstain.
Inman?
Yes, motion passes. All right,
Okay, thank you
Thanks,
for your
Danny.
patience.
appreciate that.
Don't come back.
Next item is equalization. Maureen Spencer, if you could come out and get yourself introduced, and she wants to talk about the personal property tax situation again with the committee.
Lori Spencer, Equalization Director, Grand Traverse County. I requested this opportunity to talk to you about personal property audits, the law, and the current status in my department. Audits are a formal examination and verification of financial records. A little bit, I think, is important regarding the law in my department and personal property. County equalization is mandated by MCL 21134, where it states that the County Board of Commissioners are charged with the responsibility of making sure each class of real and personal property in the respective township or city has been equally and uniformly assessed at an average level of 50% of true cash value. The purpose is to provide equity between governmental units. It is important to note in this statement the fact that personal property is a component of MCL 211. More than 60% of the Grand Traverse County's general fund revenues are generated from property taxes levied on these values. The law goes on to state that the Board of Commissioners shall establish and maintain a department to survey assessments and assist the Board of Commissioners in the matter of equalization of assessments. Some of the equalization department's duties listed in the law include the development and maintenance of accurate property descriptions, the discovery, listing, and valuation of properties for tax purposes, and the determination and use of uniform valuation standards and techniques for assessment of property. Personal property does consist of discovery, listing, and valuation for tax purposes. The Equalization Department is required to do a study in every class every year. A report is required to be sent to the state in June, which is called the Interim Report of Study Activity. Our department tries to do our job within an increasingly complex work environment. Michigan does not use the KISS theory when it comes to assessment administration. Just to give you an example, in the 2007-2008 period, 912 bills were submitted to change property tax laws. During that same period, 31 bills became changes or additions to the law. 16 of those bills were exemptions for special purpose properties. MCL 211 originally consisted of 36 pages. Today is 276 pages. The State Tax Commission sends, on average, 16 bulletins a year to keep us alert on deadlines and changes. Another item worth noting, the original assessor's manual was 194 pages on 6.5 by 8.5 and 11 paper. The current State Tax Commission manuals consist of 3 3-inch binders and 4 3-inch assessor's training manuals consisting of 2,859 pages plus addendums. With all of this, we have in the Equalization Department less staff members today than when I started here 15 years ago. Our department is probably equal to or less than surrounding counties, and it is a much more complex county with IFTs, brownfields, DDAs, neighborhood enterprise zones, renaissance zones, DNR, land banks, homesteads, ag exemptions, commercial forests, and the like to deal with. While difficult, we've managed to date because of the technology and tools we have used, including GIS, mobile technology, the Disto, Apex Sketch, digital cameras, orthophotography, and that type of thing. This particular screen is an example of some of the technology that we've implemented in the department. It's a program written in Microsoft Access for equalization department audits. And it includes on this particular screen one where we check to see if the business accounts in the real tax roll have a corresponding personal property account. And if they don't, talk to the local unit to try to see, find out why. The personal property audit objective is to achieve or enhance equity and uniformity in the assessment of personal property in Grand Traverse County, which is the law. So what is an audit? An audit is a process of verifying the accuracy of data provided by the taxpayer that is used by the assessor in the process of determining valuation of personal property for property taxation. And why do I believe audits are necessary? The big one, I think, is equity. To correct errors and omissions, audits do educate the taxpayer or the agent filling out the form as far as taxing requirements. Just to give you an idea, that they need to be listing cost new and not book value. There are some questions sometimes between whether it's real property or personal property. There's some instances where we've had problems, whether it's considered computer equipment in the classification and where we put it, whether we have pollution abatement certificates, whether there's cost emissions, construction in progress, confusion. Sometimes we have what are called ghost assets, expensed assets, inventory and supplies, and tax location, just to name a few of the types of problems. Audits also add value to the tax base that have escaped taxation and generate much needed additional current revenue. Comprehensive book audits are performed on-site at the location where the taxpayer's accounting records are located, because this is when the auditors can be in the position to balance the asset listings and accounts to corporate financials to ensure total inclusion of all assets. It allows the auditor to interact with the taxpayer. It allows the auditor information to complete the audit without unnecessary delays. And confidentiality is not compromised by having to mail accounting records out. So if we go back to the equity portion of why we do audits, most taxpayers do file their personal property tax returns correctly and are assessed correctly. But those who file incorrectly increase the burden on those that did file correctly. And this also increases the burden then on our real property taxpayers. If we can correct the improper filings, it will relieve the tax burden on all taxpayers. By law, millage rates for debt must be higher to make up for the shortage created when a tax base is missed due to incorrectly filed personal property tax returns. Millage rates for operating revenue are higher, and/or services must be reduced to make up for the shortage created when a tax base is missed. Operating millage typically supports services like police, fire, garbage collection, senior citizens, roads, and so forth. The costs of these services do not decline. They rise with inflation, wages, and higher demand. Some of the examples of those services provided by operating revenue. What happens when we have an admitted tax base is that it puts upward pressure on operated millage rates and downward pressure on the level of services. So at the end of the day, equity and fair taxation is the real issue for fair taxation requires all taxpayers be taxed on the same basis. The other thing, that if we can get equity and fairness, it produces lower overall taxes for most taxpayers, less controversy over taxes because everybody feels that it is equitable, fewer assessment appeals for the same reason, taxpayer confidence in the fairness of taxes, more tax base, and more revenue. It is well recognized throughout the assessment field that the taxation of business personal property is a self-assessment process. The information used by the assessor to arrive at values and assessments are primarily based on the information provided by the taxpayer. The accuracy of such assessments are therefore dependent upon the accuracy of the information provided to the assessor. All units of government depend on the property tax in Michigan. Counties often get about 70% or more of their discretionary revenue from property taxes. And revenue sharing, as you know, from the state to counties is often cut when there's insufficient funds for schools at the state level. This equity solution is an audit program designed to assure accuracy in listings and equitable assessments. I've put in your packet 3 options for personal property audits. Option 1 being to audit all personal property accounts reflecting current true cash values of $50,000 and greater over a program of 2 to 3 years. Revenues to be derived from this option are estimated to be $3,816,897. This option would not include utility personal property accounts. Countywide revenue projections exceed the cost of an auditing firm's services by a margin of approximately 4 to 1. Option 2 that I presented in your packet is to audit only oil and gas wells. This option was done in Otsego County in 4 townships, Chester, Dover, Livingston, and Charlton. It involved 63 parcels. $65,978,524 of taxable value was discovered in Otsego by this audit. An oil and gas well audit would cost $675 per well. There are approximately 250 producing wells in Grand Traverse County. Just to give you a little bit of background on oil and gas in Michigan, Michigan is one of the nation's major sources of oil and natural gas. Oil and gas is a $2 billion a year industry. Michigan is the 17th largest of the 33 petroleum producing states in the country. Michigan is the 6th largest energy consuming state in the nation. Oil and gas has provided more than $550 million in revenues to the Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund since 1976. Michigan is also believed to have more reserves than other Great Lakes states because it rests on the Niagaran Reef, a 430 million year old buried coral reef that trapped oil and gas. This slide shows that reef, and you can see, if you recognize our county and Otsego County, how that reef does go across the top of Michigan. That particular reef was discovered in 1968. What we've done, because we have a GIS system in Grand Traverse County to locate the oil and gas wells in the county, is we go out to the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and Environment, now called DNRE. We've downloaded their file that locates the oil and gas wells in our system. We then have to reproject it because they have it in a different projection. But you can see that the line of oil and gas wells that go across Grand Traverse County. Once we do download that file from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, we can then load it into our GIS system and overlay it on our orthophotography and also our ownership layer to find out where the oil and gas wells really are. We can pick off the GPS coordinates off of those wells and then be able to plug them into our system to go out to the field to find out where they are. This is really important to understand from a personal property standpoint, because personal property tax is paid to the jurisdiction where the personal property tax is located on tax day, which is December 31st. It is not paid, for instance, to the jurisdiction where the corporate headquarters are located, and believe you, we've had this happen in a couple of instances where they've reported to their corporate headquarters and not to their local jurisdiction. The GIS system also allows us some other advantages in studying these wells, and that the depth of the well can be extruded so that it's clearly visible. Different colors indicate different depths here of oil wells in the county. We've already taken steps in the equalization department to review the oil and gas wells in the county. The first step that we had was the database in place so that we could field verify the wells. We used the database, a laptop, a GPS unit, a vehicle, and a digital camera in the field. It's a little bit like if you've ever had a puzzle and you dump it on the table and then you want to take that puzzle and put it together. That's about what it takes when you're trying to find these particular wells. In verifying it with our database, one, we looked for name on the well and tried to locate that name in our database, which was our county database, and if we couldn't find it by name, then secondly, we tried to search by address, tried to tag each one of the wells we found to make sure that we actually had them in our database. I want to give you just a few examples of what we found in the field. You'll note that we do take a picture in the field of what we found in the field, and typically they have a sign, and then this particular sign says it's owned by Merit Energy. It gives a permit number 51186. This particular well was drilled in 1996. It is not on the tax rolls. I sent a certified letter to Merit Energy on this well, along with personal property statements to fill out for the tax years 2008, 9, and 10, the only years that we can collect on now. My letter stated in part, it has come to my attention that the personal property statements required by law have never been filed on this well. Please complete and return the statements. On August 10th, I received a response. In accordance with your request, we have verified with Merit Energy that property that is located in your township and have completed the provided L4175 for 2008 through 2010. No equipment has been added or removed from this well since it was drilled and completed in 1996. It is currently 2010. That's 14 years. We can only, as I indicated, go back the 2 years. The other question that I have is if we have no equipment on this well in 14 years, it also has some potential maintenance problems. Another one, Merit Energy Company permit number 40339, not on the tax rolls. Merit Energy Company permit 30751, not on the tax rolls. Merit Energy Company permit number 41351, not on the tax rolls. I believe from this small sample, like Otsego County, will find significant omitted taxable value if this is any indication of the reporting that is being done in oil and gas wells in Grand Traverse County. I want to remind the board that recently there was a pipeline spilled about 1 million gallons of oil in the Kalamazoo River in southwest Michigan. Also, there was a catastrophic explosion that caused an oil spill from BP offshore drilling rig in the Gulf of Mexico. This oil spill has now obtained the dubious distinction of being the worst oil spill in the United States history. There is a reason that we need taxes to be fair and equitable. not paying a fair share should not be an option. The third option that I presented in your packet is called discovery of non-filing business contract. In this particular option, Discovery Services will go out and locate and record all businesses within Grand Traverse County that are statutorily required to file a business personal property statement but are not currently doing so. In this option, there is a lower threshold that can be established. In this particular instance, I put 2,000 SEV, which is what Livingston County had used, and a payment would not be required until after the final product has been reviewed and approved. The fee for this option would be $250 for each business location that is discovered. It has been estimated by a firm that does this particular type of work that we have in Grand Traverse County somewhere between 460 and 690 businesses that are not reporting their personal property as required by law. Van Buren County in Michigan recently used this approach. They increased their taxable value 21% with discovered taxable value of $15,091,382. And I just want to remind you that this is yearly taxable value. To date, Van Buren County has not paid anything to the auditing firm because the L4154s, which are omitted properties, are being prepared for the years 2008 and 2009. But Van Buren is already receiving revenue for 2010 with the discovered accounts placed on the rolls by the assessors.
Lori, when you say they increased their value by 21%, are you saying their personal property tax value?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Another potential area of omitted property is towers. As this article states, when the Martin County Board of Commissioners set out to rewrite the telecommunications ordinance, they didn't expect to substantially add to the county's coffers, but thanks to the GIS department, that was exactly what happened. They added $3.5 million to the tax rolls. They used publicly available Federal Communication Commission, FCC data to locate licensed cell towers, much like we did with the oil wells. The first tower that I selected to look at was a water tower owned by the township. Townships are exempt, however, the co-locators located on the tower are not exempt. This particular tower has 4 co-locators located on it. The difficulty is tracking the co-locators down. Our department took a picture of the sign here which says Ameritech. I went to the roll. We do not have Ameritech on the tax rolls. The question is the constant name changes that we have with these companies. In the case of Ameritech, I'm told that it has been Dobson, AT&T, Sprint Nextel. FCC obviously is a regulating agency. I don't know what their requirements are as far as the name changes on these particular sites, just like I've asked the question on the oil wells. If they have a name at the site, is that the owner of the oil well? I'm told that that is supposed to be the case, but I don't know if that's the case in terms of towers, and that's something I'm still investigating. We also have inconsistency in reporting in our personal property statements. We've had instances where nonprofits report different personal property to the state than they do to the township. We have non-filers, in other words, people that we may realize don't file. And so typically what the assessor is supposed to do is put an assessment on that property that is just and fair. In this, we've had an instance of one non-filer where we felt what was just and fair was a 50,000 SEV for 2008 and 2009. When they did report in 2010, they reported $3,756,482 of true cash value. So I guess my question would be how just and fair were we with our estimate? And that's the problem when you're estimating. I would like to ask the board to be able to pursue one or more of these personal property audit options for the next budget cycle to achieve equity and uniformity in the assessment of personal property in Grand Traverse County. I do have experts who are willing to come in and talk to the board. One of them is the former chairman of the State Tax Commission who lives in Leelanau County, who's indicated a willingness to come in, if you'd like to hear from any of them.
Before we open it up, Lori, if we can just clarify the options again. The option one, as you presented, is to audit all the companies that are currently filing personal tax forms.
That's correct.
Audit, and option two is just to initially just go out and do oil and gas companies.
That's correct.
And option three is just to go out and find the companies that are not filing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, okay. All right, open up to the floor. Commissioner Richardson.
Well, first a general question. Because you mentioned a cost on option two, I think, of $675 per well, and a cost on option three of $250. This is utilizing a an outside agency to do the research for us?
In all instances, in all options.
In all options, and this is the estimated cost that it would cost you to hire a company to do this? Okay.
We haven't gone out for RFPs or anything, but I've called a company that happens to do this to ask them the questions, especially when I knew that in Otsego County that it had been done, and I asked, what was charged, and also in Van Buren County.
So on option three, the auditing the businesses that are not filing at all, I mean, it's a fairly simple task to come up with a list, correct? No?
If it were, I'd be doing a lot more of it.
I mean, you can't run a printout of businesses that are paying real property tax and then find out that they...
What you need and what they use are a lot of different business-type databases, and then they do essentially what's called data mining. I'm struggling just, for instance, when I go out and look at those co-locators on a cell tower, when I called the township on that one tower, water tower, and I've talked to 4 or 5 different individuals at the township, just trying to find out who's sitting on top of the tower.
They didn't even have a record of who they contracted with?
Well, they're trying to track it down for me. So tracking some of these businesses down is not easy, because a lot of times they use different names, like I pointed out the slide that says Ameritech.
Well, yeah, Ameritech is obviously no longer Ameritech.
But the sign is still telling me that that's who it is, so...
Okay, I'm just surprised the township wouldn't have a record of who they had contracted with.
Well, I'm sure that I'll get it eventually, but I haven't been able to get it this week.
On the oil and gas wells, does the state have a permitting process for oil and gas wells?
Yes, they do. Well, that was the file that we downloaded.
Okay, I mean, is it not possible to get an annual update of permits that have been issued so that we don't let these places go for 14 years before we discover them?
Well, that file is downloadable every year. I'm trying to think that there should be a mechanism that we could use to know which one is a new one as opposed to one that we've already downloaded. The other option, and I've discussed this with Beth yesterday when we were talking, one of the things that has to happen, I've talked to several of the assessors where we've gone out and audited, field verified, I should say, oil and gas wells, is what I would like the assessors to do when they send the personal property statement to the company, because this particular one with Merit Energy, when I sent it to them with the well number on it, they verified it by well number and responded to me. If we send it to Merit Energy, what we get is spaghetti back. You can't make any sense of it. You don't know what wells are involved. And so my request to the assessors, especially in oil and gas well situations, is it'll increase our accounts in personal property, but have a separate account for each well, with that actually on the statement. So when they respond, they know they're responding to that well.
That seems like that would make sense. So if there are 250 oil and gas wells in Grand Traverse County, how many of them are paid?
Well, there are a lot more wells than that, but 250 producing.
There's over 600 in the county.
Yeah.
She's saying that there's 250 that
Okay,
we
the
believe to be
250 producing, how many are paying personal property tax
That's
now.
that's what I'm saying. I've got the box, my puzzle box on the table, and I'm taking each well that I find and going to the roll and trying to make sure that we have it on the roll. That's what we're going through right now.
Do you have any estimate right now, how many, what percentage?
I know that it's not looking good, but I don't know the percentage.
All right, Commissioner Friend and then Commissioner Maxbauer.
So just the option one, which is looking at everybody right now who files personal property taxes. And they do so with some degree of accuracy and truth, right? So you have in that bunch of people, those who are filing accurate and truthful, and then some degree of those,
That's
right?
correct.
And it would be auditing those records.
That's correct.
Okay, option two is a specific industry, oil and gas wells, right? And option three is those who don't file right now and just aren't claiming their personal property tax that they have, correct?
Correct.
So I'm looking back at your objective that you said is equity and uniformity, and it seems to me like if you choose option one, leaving out option three, seems a little bit unfair. Although option one may need to be audited maybe at some point in the future, you should really address option three, which could include the flagrant abusers in the first and foremost, rather than people who are attempting to fill out the personal property taxes accurately, correct?
Correct, although I'd be willing to do all three options, but
And option two picks out a specific industry and really should be covered in totality with the other options. Option three addresses the people who are avoiding what is law and, as you mentioned, making it unequitable and not uniform in the application of the personal property taxes, correct? Okay, so in picking between the three options, you shared with me a recommendation yesterday. What is your recommendation?
my recommendation would be option three. Because they're right now just flat out not filing. I believe if we get everybody filing, then we can look at another option, which is, then you can start looking statistically, if you have one of the same type of business and they're all filing, then you look to see if they're somewhat in the same ballpark. If you don't even have some of them filing, it's hard to even do the statistics.
Okay, so, again, option three would be auditing personal property taxes for non-filing businesses contracts, correct?
Correct.
Located within Grand Traverse County. So, I would make a motion that we approve Equalization Department pursuing option three as presented on August 18th by the Equalization Director for an audit of discovery of non-filing businesses for personal property tax.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for option three to pursue those businesses not filing personal property tax. Is there support?
I'll support.
All right. Discussion, we have Commissioner Maxbauer and then Commissioner Fleece.
Lori, going back to the oil and gas industry, the 250 producing wells, those are Niagara and Antrim gas wells?
Correct.
Okay. And just as, based upon a little bit of experience that I had, each well is given a different permit number, and the higher the permit number, the newer the well is.
I might need to pick your brain on that then, because I didn't understand that, but I do know they each have...
That's the way it used to be, but I've been gone for about 10 years now, so, but that's the way it used to be. The non-filing businesses, would that include a parcel such as the Baber 521? The Merit Energy's well that they were not filing on? Would that be
Yes, it
considered a
would.
non-filing business?
It would be,
Okay.
because there's, although I've located them now, like how quick I get them on the roll and how quick, if we would get a company, but they've indicated a willingness to submit their personal property statements on the ones that I've located so far.
Well, I think they have to by law, do they not?
They do.
The next question I have for you is, have you considered meeting with Merit Energy and asking them for their cooperation?
I have talked to the...
And there are other independent,
Right.
I don't want to just
Right.
necessarily pick on Merit, but other independent oil and gas firms as well.
I've been in written conversation with the accountant for Merit Energy, and yesterday I actually was able to talk to him by telephone, and he provided everything, his cell phone, his email, and said that he is willing to work with me. And his indication to me was part of the problem is when companies change hands, which happened here between Shell and Merit,
It
that
did.
things get lost in the shuffle. My problem is finding out what's lost and making sure it's found again.
But Merit can,
You would think that a company would know what they own in Grand Traverse County, but obviously there was an issue here.
again, based upon personal experience, Merit can give you a list of producing oil and gas wells. And the well name, if they still name the wells the way Shell used to, will tell you exactly where that well location is. And how many wells were drilled in that section of that.
That's why I
Township.
want our statements to say that on them, because currently they do not report that way. They may know that information, but they do not provide it to the assessors.
But it's just a suggestion that perhaps you might want to have a personal meeting with the manager of Merit and ask for their cooperation, and other independents as well. It may save us money, and by law, they have to report it anyway.
Yeah. That's a good idea.
Okay, Commissioner Fleece and then Commissioner Wheelock.
Lori, is it not the township's responsibility through their assessing departments to do this?
To,
Do the audits?
it's our,
If an audit
well,
is,
yes, it is, but it's also our responsibility to assist the assessors,
I
which is
know,
why.
but I don't think it's a blanket responsibility of the county to go out and actually do the audits, or
If-
contract to do the audits, you know.
Sometimes if you don't take it on a county level, or sometimes in my mind even beyond a county level, if you don't do that, you're only increasing the cost, because just to give you an example, how many Burger Kings do we have in Grand Traverse County? If you go out and do one of them, it's going to cost you a whole lot more than if that company, if they went out and did all of the Burger Kings in Grand Traverse County. There's an economy of scale by doing it countywide.
Well, I think
In the economy of
government-
scale is what I'm trying to achieve a little bit and get the equity, which is my job really as an equalization director, is to make sure that we have equity. We don't have one unit that isn't picking it up and another unit that is. That's my job as equalization director, is to make sure we have that equity. And your job as a county board of commissioners.
through, say, spot audits by your department, and then you tell the assessors, you know, we're low in this area, or you've got some businesses. I don't think, I realize you're contracting with East Bay Township now, but the rest of the townships, I think that's a statutory duty of theirs. I don't think it's a statutory duty of the county to go out and do a countywide audit on real and/or personal.
No, but it is a statutory duty to make sure we have 50% of true cash value on the roll and that it's uniformly achieved. So that is a statutory
I
duty
know,
of the
but
county board.
at the rate you're going, why would we have any assessors in any of the townships? We'll just get rid of them and we'll do it
Well,
all.
I agree with you 100%.
I don't think you can do
I
that.
think we need to work together. It isn't going to happen unless we work together.
I know, but I think you're looking at this wrong and starting at it wrong by coming to this board and requesting us to perform an audit on different segments of the business, personal business. And the other question I had is 1996 on the oil well, and I don't know anything about wells, but I think a piece of equipment that was new, if it was new in 96, certainly by 2010, the value of that property probably is substantially reduced if it's worth anything. You know, it's just an operating piece of machinery. It's like you buy a new computer, the one you have in front of you. You know, the value of that today is, we'll say, $1,000. What is it in 2 years?
On that particular piece, that particular oil well, if it's still a functioning oil well, there's still some substantial value there.
And it's not accounting book value that's
Right.
valued.
It's what?
It's not the accounting book value. What Commissioner Fleece is indicating, over that period of time, that equipment would have no accounting book value. It's fully depreciated. But it's not based on the accounting book value. It's, as Lori has indicated, it's the true cash value.
Right.
So there's
and
still some value there.
And I understand that, but that's like a car of the same age, a 1996 car, in our salt-ridden society up here. You know, what's the true cash value of that car? I'll tell you what insurance companies say it is, zilch. You get in an auto accident, and they'll pay you maybe $500.
Well, it has some value, and that's what these audits would determine.
But I still think it's, or no, I don't think. It is a township function, and I don't understand why we would authorize an audit. You know, I think the townships have to do that under your direction.
All right, Commissioner, are you done? Okay, Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, I guess I have a couple things. First, I think personal property tax in itself is a blight on businesses, particularly small businesses, that's put forth by governmental entities. I am a little disturbed at the idea that all of these so-called businesses have been missed by the local tax assessors because it's their responsibility to identify all businesses within their community. And the question is, if you look at just the oil and gas people, then is that equitable? Are you going to look at the guy that does body work in his garage, the guy that does, you know, the lady that does catering out of her kitchen? You know, there's all of these types of things that are businesses that are within this community that are not paying personal property tax. Personal property tax does not use a depreciation value, like Dean said, in regard to the value of the equipment. You appoint the new cost of the equipment, and then there is a depreciation value, but it's nowhere near the same as you depreciate the equipment as you do it on your taxes and your accounting records. We, you know, in our business, you know, we have a sizable amount of equipment, much of which was old and therefore had been depreciated, but yet the cash value of it, according to the personal property tax, is way higher than I could ever sell the equipment for, or that it truly has, you know, other than the fact that it is still functional. On October 23rd of last year, we had our fire in our building. Some of that equipment was destroyed. Our personal property taxes will go up about 300% this year because of the replacement of 2 key pieces of equipment. I cannot depreciate that equipment. I can't depreciate it on my income tax because it was replaced by the insurance company. And now that value is significantly higher because it was replaced by the insurance company. I can never depreciate that again because it was replaced by the equipment, by the insurance, and I didn't get to do it, or I didn't purchase it under normal conditions. I know a number of businesses that will list all of their equipment on their property on their personal forms, and I believe that most businesses do a pretty accurate job of identifying their equipment. However, I do know a number of contractors that, for example, will have, you know, a loader and a, you know, trailer, or not a trailer because a trailer is a licensed vehicle, but a loader and an earth mover of some sort sitting on a job site. They've identified that equipment on their list when they submitted it, and then all of a sudden, 3 months later, they get a bill from East Bay Township because on December 31st, that piece of equipment was on their township. Because it comes by the entity where it was on December 31st. So, you know, I'm not sure that there's any way that personal property tax will ever to be equitable. And it's just fundamentally, for me, it's a bad thing all the way around. And the idea that we would even consider an option that looks at only a specific type of business, you want to talk about equity. How equitable is it if I identify a specific business that I'm going to go audit? I will not support an audit on personal property tax in any fashion.
Okay, before we go back to folks that are responsible, we got Commissioner Maxwell and Felice that would like to make another remark. Commissioner Thomas, did you have anything?
Well, I can't support any one of these options. I don't like the idea of personal property tax, but because of the fact that the utilities all pay on it, and these oil wells and all the big outfits pay, it's a huge part of the revenues for the entire state. But I can't see picking on one business. Either you're going to audit all of them or none of them.
Okay.
That's what
Anybody else that
part of her
hasn't
name-
had a chance to speak?
Part of her
wishes to
name is equalization,
All right.
equal part.
Commissioner Hooper or Commissioner Stepka, do you wish to speak on this matter? Okay. All right, going back to Commissioner Max Bauer, and then Felice, and then Richardson.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, Commissioner Friend, but you were not picking in your motion on any particular business. You were saying the non-reporting businesses, correct?
Yes, and because I do agree with what Sonny and Dick were saying is, the whole base of this is fairness and equitable. And how do you do that when you cherry pick an industry to
Correct.
target? And it makes more sense to me that you look at who should be paying rather than a specific industry. And as you made in your point, those businesses will be covered in what we're talking
Yes.
about.
The other question I have for you, Lori, is when you and I had this conversation, you told me, and I want to make sure that this is clear, that we will not be paying that $250 per business unless a business is found that has not been reporting. Is that
Not only
correct?
unless a business has been found, but also that that business has a minimum threshold of value.
Okay. And where, and this probably is a question for Dean, where are we going to find the funds if this motion passes, the $250?
You don't pay it until afterwards, correct? After discovery is made.
Correct.
So
But
we would use-
But let us assume that we have a $5,000 bill.
As you saw in the example, you actually collect the year's taxes before the audits are done, so there'll be revenue that comes in as a result
Okay.
of that can help
All
pay
right,
for it.
thank you. I just wanted to clarify that.
Before we go to Commissioner Felice, I'd like to clarify the motion if I can. Is part of your recommendation for these options to go out for proposals, to have a company come in and bid this, or is this going to be done by your office?
No, this part of my proposal would be to develop an RFP to have a company come in.
All right, so is the maker and the second fine with that? All right, okay. Moving on to Commissioner Felice.
I received several calls on this yesterday, and it's an item that has a tendency to make people excited, but the one thing on the businesses that are not reporting, I had one former assessor and township supervisor that told me, he says, you know how I handled that in my township? He says, when I discovered them, which it's pretty easy to do because you know most of the businesses, he says, I just assessed them without any contact, sent them the tax bill. If my assessment was wrong, he says, I heard immediately and they were more than happy to fill out the form. He said, I had some that I never heard a word from, so each year I just kept bumping them up. And he says, when it got to where they thought it was too much, they would come in and see me. And he says, I had very little trouble with that.
I want to go
And-
back to this example. That's exactly what was done here by this assessor. How good a job do you think I did?
I know, but that's not my point. You're out there and you obviously have no concept of what you were doing when you guessed it. That's just a guess. That'd be like me walking out, and was that on oil field property?
No, that was not.
But you have to have some basis to make that judgment, and that's where the tax assessors come in. That's their responsibility. I won't support the motion either.
Okay, Commissioner Richardson.
Well, I certainly agree with Commissioner Wheelock that the business personal property tax is a nasty regressive tax that doesn't serve anybody any purpose, except that it does raise revenue, and it's not our decision. It's the hand we've been dealt, and I think we're looking at, you would have to go to a constitutional convention to restructure the whole, how taxes are dealt with in the state of Michigan. So, having said that, obviously, Commissioner, you're paying your personal property tax, and I think it's only fair that everyone who is supposed to pay it should pay it. So I will be supporting the motion.
All right, Dennis.
Yeah, a couple of comments. First of all, I want to be clear on this. Option 3, Lori, that the motion addresses, what that will do is it will identify properties that are businesses that are not paying personal property tax. It will do nothing to evaluate to assess the value of the personal property. Is that correct?
Correct. What it'll do is give us those individuals, to get those statements out to those individuals and tell them they must fill the statements out.
Okay, so your example that you just had up, where it was assessed at $50,000 and the true value was $1,003,000, it won't do anything to help that situation. It won't provide any assistance to the local assessors to give them an evaluation. Okay, option 1, which is much more expensive, am I correct in my understanding that that would actually go in and assess businesses
It would
and
actually
provide
audit
the actual
those.
assessment of the personal property, which would give us the basis then, and the township assessors, the basis to go in and defend those in a tax tribunal hearing or in an appeal?
Correct.
Okay, so I just wanted to be clear, all we're getting on option 3 is a list of businesses that haven't filed. Another example that Lori told me about the other day, we had a business in, I believe, East Bay Township that had been filing personal property of $50,000 a year or something like that, and then they went in and asked for a tax abatement from the township and listed their personal property at $1,200,000. Okay, that's how we caught that one. My point is simply this, I don't want the board or anyone to get the impression that by doing option 3, which I don't agree with, is going to give you anything substantial. All it's going to do is identify the businesses, and then if the townships or Lori don't have the time or the expertise to go in and assess them, it's not going to provide you with any kind of, it may make little difference, is my concern, unless they have the expertise to go in and actually assess and defend. And that becomes particularly important with things like utilities, where it's very difficult to have that kind of expertise. And that's why, while I understand the idea of picking out one business and going after one business, there's clear example from the Otsego case that regardless of whether it's right or wrong, Commissioner Fleece, they're not being fairly assessed, and we're losing a great deal of revenue as a result of not doing those. And my recommendation to you would be to go after reassessing the personal property on the oil and gas wells, and then allowing us to further research the possibility of getting a state grant to look at the other personal property tax. And the reason I say that is back in 2004, we had a grant from the state of how much, Lori?
The grant at that time, I believe, was $76,000.
To help us go in and do those assessments, and we chose not to do that. The other thing I want to point out is we're going to get into this budget, and you probably know what I'm going to say, but we have a large shortfall in revenue, and you're going to be faced with a situation of making significant cuts. You know, I hear the board and I hear others always talk about the fact that we need to act as a business. We need to be more like a business. Well, I would submit to you that any business that's out there that had revenue due them would, whether morally right or wrong or ethically you agree with it, would do everything they could to collect that revenue. And that is not what we're doing here. And it makes it very difficult, to do this job when we know that's sitting there. When Lori came to me with her budget and had to cut a couple of positions in order to make this budget balance, her budget balance, it's pretty hard to sit there with her and not agree with the fact that if she was able to do the job that she can with the tools that she needs, that there would be considerably more revenue than what she's going to be short, and several of our other departments are going to be short. So I understand the concern about going after one industry, but it's an industry that we've demonstrated clearly has a shortfall, and I would just ask the board at some point to consider that as a possibility and then look to go further if the results of that are fruitful. I just don't think option 3, and I guess I was surprised that Lori had recommended that, but I just don't think option 3 is going to give us anything more than a list. And that list is then going to have to be investigated by somebody who has expertise and staff and time to go out and actually assess those. And I just haven't seen that any of the local assessors or Lori's office has that time, or in some cases, that expertise. Thank you.
All right. Before we go to Commissioner Friend, clarification on the motion, to the, I guess, to the best of your knowledge, that if option 3 just creates a list of businesses, and that is the sole purpose behind the request for proposal.
It does do exactly what Dennis said, it creates a list. In Van Buren County, however, that list did produce $15 million. In other words, they did report, and it increased their taxable value 21%. So what Dennis is saying, though, is if you get a statement back, it's still self-reporting. You get a statement back from that business, it's not going to necessarily, that statement is not necessarily going to reflect the value of what they have or their assets. But it is going to come back with some sort of statement, which you don't have at all right now. For instance, if I go out and get that Merit Oil well, and they come back with a statement, I'm going to pick up that value whether I know that what they're reporting to me is correct without an audit.
So would it be your understanding that if a company put a bid in for the request for proposals, that would include the capturing of their cost, perhaps 12 months later when we actually do get the money in? I mean, is that how you would see that going? Or would they just have a flat fee? Or would they just have a flat fee for capturing the list, and we would have to pay for that?
You do not pay them anything unless they produce somebody that is not reporting that they know should be reporting, and it has to have a minimum value.
But all that they're going to show you is this business is not reporting. It's going to be up to the local assessor or Lori's office to actually go in and value the personal property.
Or get them to report.
Or get them to report, but it's the same example, and it may be the exception. It would certainly be the exception more than the rule. I agree with Commissioner Wheelock. Most businesses try to report that accurately. But, there are examples of the business that have reported for 3 or 4 years $50,000 in personal property, and then when they filed their for a tax abatement, showed $1.2 million. Isn't that the example you gave me? And so, what we'll do is we'll have a list. I assume we'll take that list, we'll give it to the local township assessor, and say, here, these are not reporting any personal property tax, have them report it. They'll send them out. They may get a response back from a company saying, here, this is the personal property that we have, and it's worth X dollars. Unless that assessor goes out and does an actual physical audit or sends somebody in, they'll have no idea whether that value is anything close to being correct. It might pick up some, but will it be fair and equitable? That's the question. The other option, which is much more extensive, and I quite frankly don't think you're ready for that yet, that option is not only going to identify the properties, but is going to go in and actually do the physical audits of all those properties, so you have value. And that's really the question.
All right, Commissioner Friend?
Is the city included in this?
Yes.
Okay, Commissioner Friend and then Commissioner Thomas.
Actually, the question I wanted to ask you, I think you answered already. When we were saying option 3 wouldn't produce us anything, I don't know that that's what historically has been found by other counties who have done this. You mentioned Van Buren County, and they in fact did receive positive benefit from undergoing something we're talking about with
Well, if you get
option
somebody to
3.
report that hasn't reported, you're getting more than you have now.
And then, if by chance, I mean, right now the county's not doing any of this. If we choose option 1, we're already talking to people who are self-reporting accurately and honestly to the best of their ability, and probably some in there that are not. But to go after them would be leaving out this population that is just not filing. So once you identify them, they self-report, they actually become part of Group 1 eventually, correct?
Correct.
So later on down the years, if this ends up being beneficial and showing fair and equitable results, and you decide to undertake one, then you're being even more fair and even more equitable, correct?
Correct. And option one, of course, you can work your RFP with a company any way you want to. Option one happened to be the option that we explored the last time, and what we did was they set up their fees based on the complexity of the business. And so they looked at our actual accounts to establish those fees. They weren't looking at accounts that we didn't have, because that wouldn't make any sense.
So option 3 is an initial step that would be fair and equitable and has produced results in other counties.
It has produced results, whether
But
they're...
but in fairness, it would be fair and equitable in terms of making sure that the ones we can identify report something. That doesn't mean it's fair and equitable. It doesn't mean that they're fairly
We're
reporting.
achieving a more fair and more equitable. We're moving in that direction.
We may be, yes, we're moving in that direction. When you bring up the comparison of that revenue will be brought in, you can't compare county to county, but in that case, you're correct. That county who did option 3 brought in $15 million of additional personal property value. But in option 2, the oil and gas wells in Otsego brought in $65 million. So you can't compare the $15 million that option 3 brought in with the $65 million that option 2 brought in, because they're different counties. But obviously, to ignore the $65 million, I don't feel we can do that.
Commissioner Thomas, all set? I guess I have a question. Would option 3 obviously also include identifying those gas and oil companies that are not currently filing?
My assumption is yes, because they're not filing, and if that's what they're doing, is looking for those that are not filing.
All right, question for, I guess you or Dennis, of the counties that just solely looked at, let's see, we'll get him in the room. Dennis?
Yes.
Of the county or counties that did the oil and gas, was there identification for the ones that were not reporting versus the ones that were reporting but underreporting?
Well, I think there would be in this case, because Lori has all the permit data that's been downloaded on the GIS system.
So my question is item number 3, would that also include oil and gas companies that are not currently filing?
Lori would have to answer that.
I mean, we would capture part of that grouping.
I
Correct.
believe that would be correct.
Okay, all right.
But that's one of the things that if you want to explore any of these options, that if we can bring in some experts, we could bring in some of those counties. I'm sure I could get somebody from that county to come in if you had a particular option that you would like to explore. Or we could bring in the chairman of the State Tax Commission, who has indicated his willingness to come in and talk.
All right, is there any other discussion from board members? Hearing none, we have a motion on the floor to move forward with option 3, which is to go out for requests for proposals to identify those companies that are not currently filing a personal tax form. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Thomas?
No.
Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Hooper?
No.
Wheelock?
No.
Fleece?
No.
Max Power?
Yes.
Inman?
Yes. Motion passes 5-4. All right. Thank you. Anything else, Lori?
Yeah, my only question then is, my next step then would to be to develop the RFP
Correct.
to bring back to the board?
Correct.
Build the RFP, Lori. I don't think it needs to come back to the board, does it? She can go out with the RFP and then bring the results back.
Results back?
You obviously have to approve the RFP.
Yeah.
before it's signed.
I'll go over there.
All right, just clarification, the item that was pulled off the consent calendar we'll handle is item D under Department action items. So we'll go to item C, the EDC, Recovery Zone Facility Bonds. Jean, if you'd like to come up and get yourself introduced and...
Good morning. My name is Jean Dorenzi with the Planning and Development Department. As outlined in your packet, I gave you a brief overview of the process that has occurred to allow private businesses in Grand Traverse County to take advantage of the American Recovery Facility Bond that was enacted in 2009. In December of 2009, you designated a recovery zone to allow the businesses to use facility bonding financing. The federal government, through the state, allocated $8,184,000 to Grand Traverse County for this private facility financing. And private facility financing also does not require the full faith and credit of Grand Traverse County. The American Recovery Act, as you know, is a program that was enacted by the federal government to encourage economic recovery, promoting private investment, economic new tax growth, new jobs created to promote that recovery for our nation. Criteria was established by the EDC and approved by the county board in February. And with that, we received 2 applications under this program. Those applications were sent to our bond counsel, Peter Eklund of Axon Eklund and Associates, and the recommendation to the EDC was that Hagerty Insurance had a superior position with their lending and was able to allow bonding to occur by December 31st, 2010. It's important to note that these bonds must be issued by December of this year. As outlined in your packet, if financing has occurred for Hagerty, they will invest over $15 million for a new 44,000 square foot building next to their current building that they occupy, which will bring a campus-like setting to this area. The project itself will bring 156 new jobs with an average wage of over $43,000 a year. The new tax base for the taxing jurisdictions for this portion alone is over $400,000 for the taxing jurisdictions. And the local commitment was also a criteria for the facility bonds, that they hire local services. Hagerty has made that commitment. They've hired a local engineering firm, an architectural firm for the design of the building, and they've also hired a local construction manager for the oversight of that construction project. The Economic Development Corporation approved 2 resolutions that was created by the Bond Council. The first was the Notice of Inducement, and the second was approving the project area and project district area and asking for appointment of 2 additional directors to the EDC. The Economic Development Corporation, when you issue bonds, requires statutorily that 2 additional directors be appointed to the EDC specifically for that project. And in this case, for the Hagerty, that would mean that we need 2 additional directors that are either city residents or have a business ownership in the city of Traverse City. The request before you today, there's 2 requests. One, to ask for a subcommittee to be appointed to appoint 2 additional directors for your August 25th meeting. There was an ad in the paper yesterday asking for interested applicants to make their application to the County Board of Commissioners office. And the second is to place on your agenda for August 25th 2 resolutions that will be drafted by the Bond Council, recognizing the resolution allocating the recovery zone volume cap and approving the project, and the second resolution would be approving the project area and project district area and the appointment of 2 additional directors.
Okay, we have a recommendation coming in. I guess the first question I'd like to clarify, and then we'll open it up to the commission, is that you currently have an ad in the paper for parties of interest to apply for the EDC board?
Correct.
Okay.
That appeared yesterday.
All right.
And Chris...
What's the deadline on that?
I think the deadline was August 19th. Yep. And so the idea here is, if you appoint a committee today, it's been advertised that the interviews have to be held on the 24th, the day before your board meeting.
Wow.
In discussion with Commissioner Richardson, who sits on the EDC, we wanted to try to get this done to not delay this a month, and it's very fast track, but maybe Commissioner wants to speak to it.
Yes, go ahead.
The issue here, and I'm sure Gene Dorenzi can, fill in more details, so she probably knows better than I do, but the state law requires 2 extra directors who will only sit on matters of these bonds for the project. And it's really just between here and the end of the year. But because of the very short time frame, if we don't get it done by the 25th, waiting a whole extra month could
I
be...
got you.
could
All
be
right, okay,
difficult.
that's,
So I would actually make the resolution that the County Board of Commissioners appoint, set up an ad hoc committee to interview 2 potential additional directors to the EDC specifically for the recovery zone facility bonds.
all right, motion by Commissioner Richardson, support by, who's that? Commissioner Wheelock, to move forward with the ad hoc committee to interview and appoint
Do we need to
2 members.
add the district area also then? Designate the district area as
I'm
as
asking
specified?
that
two pieces.
the
Let's just do-
resolutions be added to your agenda, yes.
Let's do them in 2 separate motions if we can.
All right, that's fine.
Okay, all right. So we have a motion and a support to move forward with the 2 additional applicants to be interviewed and hopefully appointed by August 25th to the EDC Recovery Zone Facility Bonds, for the EDC Recovery Zone Facility Bonds. All right, discussion.
I have a question.
Commissioner Friend and then Commissioner Wheelock.
How much was the other applicant looking for?
Their application was requesting $16 million. They would be able to utilize the 8, but their financing was not as secure, and it would take quite a long process to be able to know if that financing would work or not.
Okay, so it was a mutual exclusive choice. You had to choose one or the other.
Yes.
Okay. And was this, were we trying to capture some of the funds from other counties that weren't going to utilize them?
We
What
were.
was the status of that?
We actually have asked for that to occur. There's no law that allows that to occur. There is legislation in the House right now that the Treasury would just take back that allocation and reallocate. And there's also another tied to that is extending the recovery zone for another 2 years. But it's up in the air.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Wheelock.
I guess the key point in this discussion is the fact that these bonds have to be sold by December 31st, 2010. We need to move this thing as quickly as possible if we're going to have access to this money. Isn't that correct? 2010, right?
That is correct right now.
So if we waited until the end of September to appoint the committee, and then by the time the process, there's no way we get this done by December, so.
It would be real tight.
It's important.
So after this motion, we'll move forward with,
Appointing
if
the
it
committee.
approves, we'll get the appointment done. Any other discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Passes. Now we need a motion to, who would like to volunteer for the ad hoc committee? Commissioner Richardson, Commissioner Max Bauer, Commissioner Wheelock, and anyone else?
Is 3 enough?
3 is
Three's
fine?
enough, yeah.
All right. We need a motion to approve those folks.
So moved.
Okay. Moved by Commissioner Thomas. Support. Support by Commissioner Fleece. Appoint the ad hoc committee as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
So now, that meeting has to be held on the 24th, and if possible, could we get a time now when we could do that? Because Chris needs to get those set up. Is there a time that works for you on the 24th?
Well, I have claims and accounts at 10 o'clock, so...
So would you like to do
Other
it
than
before
that.
that? Would you like to do it at 8 a.m., or would you like to do it at 9? Of course, we don't know how many people.
You're asking Ross that question?
I didn't know.
8 a.m. would be fine.
Okay. Would that work with you, Commissioner Wheelock?
Yeah, I'm a big proponent that these either have to be very early in the morning or they have to be in the evening because
Yeah,
people do have to work
or
for a
5
living.
o'clock would also...
Would you rather do 5 at night?
No, probably 8 in the morning's easier.
What's your
for me.
commissioner?
Just fine.
Okay. All right, 8 o'clock in the morning, and we'll contact you with a room and location. Thank you.
Okay, we need another motion designated the project in the district area.
Or not.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to put the resolutions for the project district area on our agenda for the August 25th board meeting, the approval of the designated area.
And that's what we need,
Second.
is that what we need, Gene?
Yes.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Wheelock, seconded by Commissioner Richardson. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, passes.
Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
thanks, Gene. If the committee would allow, Dennis asked if we could move an item up because of the time list of, under item E, Administration Special Recognition, if we could do that now. Dennis, if you want to take that.
Thank you,
item.
Mr. Chairman. I'm really pleased today to acknowledge the fine work of our Finance Director, Bott, and his Deputy Director, Heidi Schweppe. Heidi and Dean have spent the last 2 years or more, 2 years, studying to become certified public finance officers in the country. There are only about 450 certified public finance officers in the whole country. And I'm pleased to announce that Heidi and Dean both were awarded that status this past summer. They were 2 of 6 people in the country who were awarded the status of certified public finance officers. And they really spent the better part of 2 years, day and night, kind of studying, and I think you took 5 exams, is that right? 5 pretty strenuous exams, and Heidi pushed Dean the whole way to make him, to have him be successful in this effort, so Heidi, thanks for that. But I just think it's indicative of kind of what we try to do in this county, and I wanted to recognize both of them for their fine work. You know, there are probably 10,000 finance people in the country in government, and to be 2 of 450 is, I think, quite an accomplishment that they've done. And so I just wanted to take this time. Heidi came in from her vacation day today, so we could recognize her. And of course, you know how I feel about both of them and their good work that they do for us. And so just a thank you for both of you for the extra time and effort you put in to help make Grand Traverse County even more recognized and even more transparent in the financial dealings we do. So thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you.
That was Dean who?
Yeah. And you can go to Heidi, you don't have to say.
Unless you'd like to.
Before she goes, though, I do want to say a few words. Dennis is correct. I mean, it was always some stress for me knowing that Heidi was taking, we did not take the same examinations, but to know that there was the potential for Heidi to become a certified public finance officer before, that was stressful for me.
But I also want to tell you, I'm going to interrupt him, I have to tell you, they not only did that, but instead of taking the courses in the regular order, you know, this test, this test, this test, they figured out that if they took them in different orders, they could buy one set of manuals and save half the amount of money, and they switched off taking the test, and then they help each other, which I thought was really kind of cool.
But I do want to thank Heidi for her help and just the fact that she was willing to take time to do this and to study for these examinations. It did help me. It did push me, and I'm very fortunate to have her in the finance department. And I don't tell her that enough, but I am very proud that she is also a certified public finance officer. And thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Heidi.
This morning. All right. Now we'll take up, which would be item D, the item that was pulled from the consent calendar, item B1. Randy, you want to come up? And I think, Ross, you have the floor on that one.
I mean, obviously, I'm pleased that the new contract does, as proposed, does come up with some savings. But I guess my question is, was there any bid with any other telephone companies, or?
No, not this time.
Was that even an option, or?
We just did state of Michigan pricing and used that bid process instead of our own, because AT&T mostly is the only one that can provide some of this stuff because they have a network in place. There is one other network, but it's a very small network and not as reliable, in my opinion.
Okay. So 3 years is 3 years from starting when?
Starting this month when we sign those.
When it gets passed out by us on the 25th of August?
Correct.
Okay. All right, I'm sorry to take up your time, but that was my main question. I would go ahead and make the motion to renew the current local usage agreement, the Centrex agreement and Garfield Road Prime Rate Services contract with at and T at the rate stated above for a contract term of 3 years.
Support. Moved by Richardson, support by Wheelock. Move forward with the recommendation as presented for item B, item 1. Discussion.
That will be an annual savings of about $11,500 a year.
Okay, great. Hearing no discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes.
Thanks, Randy.
Thanks for staying. Thank you. All right, now we will move on to item under the finance report. Dean?
On page 22 is the trial balance through the end of July 31st, followed by a revenue and expenditure summary for the general fund. I think if we look at page 23, we are just now starting to collect the property tax revenue. As of, I checked yesterday, tax revenue in this report is just under 1.6 million, but as of yesterday, we had collected 4.9 million, so the tax revenues are really starting to come in at this point. The other comment, I'll try to be brief here, the revenues on page 23, just because an item is bracketed, I want to mention that that's not necessarily a budget variance, an unfavorable budget variance in the 2010 budget. For example, with the state grant item, we budgeted lower revenues in some of these cases. Excuse me, I meant to say the federal grant line item. So these are not necessarily indicating unfavorable budget variances. And I have explained the major reasons for the differences in the amounts, and if there are any questions, I will do my best to answer those.
Anybody got any questions for Dean on that item? Commissioner Richardson?
Speaking of on the revenue side here, it appears to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the drop in recording fees that's probably the most significant drop in revenue?
Yes, that is correct. I checked those revenues yesterday. There seems to be, and I think it generally does happen over the summer months, there has been a little bit of a recovery. I'm not sure, though, that we're going to, it's clear that we're not going to be at the level we were a year ago. I'm not certain, I guess if I was going to project how those revenues in that department would compare to the budget that we have for this year, I don't think we're going to hit that budget. There is a budget adjustment in the packet to take those revenues down. I think with that adjustment, we're going to be pretty close to actual revenue for the year.
Okay.
The actual revenue would be at about where the lower budget total is.
Okay. So obviously, a lower revenue amount was budgeted for this year, and even with that, we're still going to be under that a little bit.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any other item on the budget trial balance?
Well, we're going to talk about expenditures.
Okay.
What's the big increase in other? I mean, you listed two things that's for $64,000, but we're up $650,000?
It's a timing difference. The insurance invoice, we have an insurance fund because that's a requirement of how we account for our insurance expenditures. The general fund appropriates money to the insurance fund to cover our annual insurance costs with MMRMA. In this year, through the end of July, that invoice or that appropriation is recorded in this 7 months, but it was not recorded until August in 2009. So it's primarily a $600,000 timing difference with the insurance appropriation.
So
that should have been
pretty much makes up
disclosed.
the bulk of that
That
then,
should
right?
have been disclosed there, but we missed that.
Okay.
Any other questions on that item?
Excuse
All
me.
right, Dean, we can move on to budget adjustments.
I don't know if, the first one is a little unusual, so I should explain that. We have, it's forfeited contributions to the defined contribution retirement system. This is on page 26. As employees leave the county, if they're on the defined contribution retirement and they're not vested, they lose the county, the employer's share, the county's contribution. And for the second quarter of 2010, that amounted to almost $34,000 in money that came back to the county. I was using those revenues to cover, we had overestimated what the allowable transfer from the Revenue Sharing Reserve Fund was, which was primarily due to the fact that that's adjusted every year by the change in the Consumer Price Index. That was a budgeting item that now we know to be more conservative with that estimate as well. But those revenues coming back helped cover that difference.
Okay, any questions on the budget
Move for
adjustments?
approval.
All right, moved by Commissioner Thomas, support by Commissioner Wheelock to approve the budget adjustments as presented. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
What? I've had my
Oh, I'm
hand
sorry.
up.
I'm sorry.
You were
ahead.
looking over there. Dean, on budget adjustments, how are budget adjustments within departments accounted for? We don't get those, do we?
No.
Okay.
Let me, we do a fair amount of budget adjustments. Most budget adjustments are the nature of a line item transfer. And there is an established budget resolution where the departments have certain levels of authority. They have to be reviewed and approved by me, of course, but most line item transfers, moving money from one expenditure line item to another, are done before we bring the invoices or the bills down, not down, to the Statutory Finance Committee. Those are done on a daily basis to make sure that the departments stay within their total appropriation. Most increases or decreases in the budget require the board's approval, and that's what you're seeing here. If it increases or decreases the budget by more than $5,000, that has to come back to the board for approval. And there are budget adjustments, as the first one on page 26, where you have revenue sources that simply were not built into the budget that come back. And a lot of times these budget adjustments are of the magnitude where we're making corrections during the year for revenues that we won't realize or for expenditures that were not anticipated. Those generally come back to the board for approval.
Okay, I heard you say that if it's over $5,000, it comes before the board.
Correct.
Okay, so is the $13,000 budget adjustment for Parks and Rec, is that in this budget adjustment list?
No, it's not. That was a line item transfer.
Okay.
And those line item transfers that are within the same expenditure department are not required to come back to the
Okay,
board.
thank you.
Any other questions on budget adjustments? Let's do a roll call, please.
Commissioner Richardson?
Yes.
Stepka?
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Hooper?
Yes.
Wheelock?
Yes.
Fleece?
Yes.
Max Power?
Yes.
Thomas?
Yep.
Inman?
Yes, motion passes. Moving on to the Shell Fleet Card.
What this item would do, Smoka Oil brought this to my attention. They're offering, if we would set up a Shell Fleet Card, we could save 3%. It would actually be a rebate coming back to us, and that would be currently about 8 cents a gallon on our fuel purchases. It does require us, to have another credit card, and the credit card policy requires board approval to do that. Now, we're currently in the last year of a 3-year agreement with Smoka Oil, and so the gas needs to be bid out, but I would still like your consideration to do this because of the savings that we could realize in our fuel purchases.
Commissioner Hooper.
I would move that we authorize the county to apply for a Shell Fleet Card with Smucker Oil Company.
Support.
Okay, moved by Commissioner Hooper, supported by Commissioner Fleece, to move forward with the Shell fleet card as presented. Discussion? Commissioner Richardson.
Dean, it says here the Finance Department would retain and control the use of this card. Can you explain?
The departments currently have individual cards that they have in their vehicles. This, we need the card simply to make the payments with Schmoeckel Oil. They initially wanted this card in their office on Barlow. I refused to do that. This card will not be, it's not necessary for all of the cards or the departments to have the master credit card for the account, and it is set up to handle the payment on all of the invoices.
So in other words, we get a monthly billing from Schmoeckel, and then you use the card to pay that?
Correct.
Because the vehicles refill at that station down there on Premier Street?
That's correct. The process, all of the invoices that you see from Schmoeckel Oil when you approve claims and accounts, that's not going to change. The sheriff's office will still receive their bills so they can verify that the charges were made by their employees. They will come back into the finance department, and you'll see all of those invoices then with the statement that shows the credit card making the payment.
But you
on the
still get
account.
the discount. We'll still get the discount.
It's going to come back as a rebate. I'm not exactly sure how that works, but in how we distribute that back to all of the departments, I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet, but I think it makes sense to do this. The one thing I do need to do, though, with the board resolution is establish the credit limit on the card, and I think that's going to be 2 months' worth of fuel purchases. I mean, this card does have to have a limit on it. I just did not have time to calculate that.
Commissioner Wheelock?
I'm not exactly sure, but I'm pretty sure the way these work is similar to our fire trucks. We have individual cards in each truck that we just scan, and it identifies what vehicle got fuel and how much, and then the bill goes to the rural system, and then they pay it with a fleet card. So, and I'm sure this works the same way.
That is correct.
But they will get a printout that says, these vehicles got this much fuel on this date at such and such a location. So
really, there's no
all this
difference.
truly is a way to pay the
There's no
bill.
difference in it works just by adopting this card, we get a 3% rebate.
That is correct. The
Okay.
departments will not see any change in the process of purchasing fuel or in getting their invoices, so they make sure that those charges are appropriate.
Strictly a rebate for the county.
Okay. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Okay, response to audit questions.
When we presented the audit last month, there were a number of questions regarding the retirement, the defined benefit retirement disclosures. I had Heidi prepare on page 32 an analysis of our defined benefit program. And I'll, I guess, admit that I know one of the questions was, and I think Commissioner Richardson was requesting or asking about the percentage of covered payroll. And those numbers are very large. I mean, that is a percentage that definitely should generate some questions. Heidi listed on the middle of the page the definition that comes right out of the actuarial valuation of what each of the items is and how it's defined. And I think to just start this discussion with the board, that percentage, the far right column, is very large because of the fact that we have a shrinking payroll for defined benefit retirement purposes. Most of our bargaining units have gone to a closed system where no longer new hires coming in are not on the DB, they're on the DC. And you can see there that, in most cases from 2000 and, well, I guess the pattern isn't the same, but the payroll base is just shrinking with time, and it will continue to shrink.
Commissioner Richardson.
Okay, because I'm obviously not an actuary, and so if I look at the number under the actuarial accrued liability of $79.2 million, that's the what's considered to be our liability for everybody who is now getting a pension and everyone who will get a pension under the defined benefit system.
That is correct.
Based on how long we think everybody's going to live from an actuarial basis.
Right, that is correct.
Okay. And as far as the payment that we have to make to MERS, the MERS DB annual payment, we have no choice, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, we can't negotiate with them, we can't say, give us a break for a couple of years, times are tight, whatever.
That is correct also. On page 33 and 34, we provided information regarding what those employer contributions are.
That's the part I didn't understand.
Well, what this does, Commissioner Richardson, by bargaining unit, it indicates what those contributions are. There's 3 columns of information. This is on page 33, and this is for 2010. Retirement costs consist of the normal cost, which is for those employees that are currently working and that have the defined benefit retirement benefit. That's what their cost would be if you're accruing that over the period of time that they work. It's the normal cost, and you can see it's the smallest component of our total DB cost. And then because we're only 50% funded, we have the unfunded component. The far right column then combines the two, and it gives you the monthly amount. And then the total at the bottom of the box is what the contribution is for the county for the entire fiscal year.
So let's take number 13, the circuit court, where the unfunded liability is actually quite a bit less than the normal cost.
You have a good eye. They're actually one of the divisions that's open. So new hires coming into both the circuit court and there's group 17 are the only 2 units that are open, and they generally they're paying a percentage of payroll. And
Okay, so we're still getting money from the employees.
The new one's hired, everyone is part of it.
Okay.
But, of course...
But then if you go down to section 18 exempt, where the unfunded liability is almost 10 times the normal cost, then you have a closed division and a lot of people on defined benefit, but no one new contributing. Is that...
Sorry, I didn't I was looking at the next page.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, I said, so in the exempt category, you have a lot of people who, are under defined benefit, but nobody new supporting the system.
Correct, that is correct. If you flip, looking at that group 18 and turning the page, you'll see the contributions for 2011. That unfunded piece goes from 60 to 67,000, and some of that is due to the fact that each year the actuarial valuation takes into consideration the fact that there's 2 years coming off of that period of time over which you have to fund the unfunded component. Because MERS truly wants us to be fully funded in this defined benefit.
Well, part of my problem is I think MERS truly wants everybody to be under defined benefit, and so
Yes, they
they
do.
really hurt you if you're not. And I've watched meetings where they've done presentations to the city as well as the presentations here, and their bias is pretty pronounced, in my personal opinion, and that opinion is shared with some other people, but it is what it is, I guess, So, well, again, looking at that section 18, so in 2010 it's 7303, but in 2011 it's 7163 in the normal cost. So does that mean that we've actually declined a person or two in the process?
That could well be the case. I mean, you'd have to look at the demographics for that. We could figure that out. I don't know if that is the case, but most likely that is probably the reason.
Okay.
I guess I have a question if no one else has. Dean, what amortization are we under 2011? Have they shrunk that amortization even more in 2011 versus 2012?
I believe for 2011, we're on a 14-year amortization of the unfunded liability.
And then that continues to decrease until?
It goes down ultimately to a 5-year amortization, and I think we hit that 5-year in 2016.
Goes down 2 years a year, right?
It drops by
So
2
16 years.
So
per year.
if I recall the graph previously presented to the board, there was kind of a large peaking up, and then there was kind of a bottoming out of the peak, and then eventually there was a year that went down at almost the same rate. So do you recall what year that was, that we would maximize our contribution? And then we would see a continued reduction?
You actually drew the graph quite nicely. 2016, 2017 is when we are supposed to reach that peak, and then after that, we're supposed to decrease because of this accelerated funding that they have us on. Now, I mean, this you can see from the numbers, we go from 3.9 million to 4.2. I'm not sure what that percentage is in the total contribution, but we continue to increase until we get to 2016. And I think 2016 is the year that you actually hit the maximum contribution, and that's with all of the assumptions staying the same. I mean, if there's changes in market factors, I mean, if we have any more erosion, in market value, or, things could happen in the fight. I hate to be that way, but that's why they do these valuations every year. But right now, it's scheduled to, on this plan that we're on with the accelerated funding, 2016 is the goal. I mean, if we can get there and somehow manage to make the contributions, we should see some relief.
Commissioner Richardson.
And one final question from me. On the defined contribution annual payment, how would you explain the decrease in 7.7% for the 2011 projection? Is that just based on possible staff reduction?
Yes. I'm not sure, Commissioner Richardson, if the summary on page 35 is actual, or if that would agree with the budgets, but yes, it is due to reductions in staff, and that is a fixed contribution of covered payroll, so.
Right. Okay.
I guess I have a question. Did we, Dennis, get a determination that we could use a general obligation bond to cover the shortfall versus some kind of specified bond for the unfunded portion, so we can extend the amortization on our own?
We are told that there is no legal mechanism right now for us to do that. So we do not have the ability to bond this on our own and repay it early. I'm working with John Axe and our local legislators to see what needs to be done to introduce some legislation to allow that to occur. Dean and I believe that if we were allowed to do that, there would be significant savings to the county if we went to 20 or 25 years and just spread it out equally, and it could be as much as $1 million. We don't know. In the interim, we have started discussions with MERS about this, and I don't want to give any kind of false hope. MERS is looking at the possibility, though, if they could bond on our behalf. Dean and I are a little skeptical of that, simply because we don't have a lot of faith in the MERS system and their ability to kind of, manage these things. But they're exploring that for us, and we'll review that when the time comes. So we're working on two fronts here. We're looking at trying to draft legislation that would allow us to sell general obligation bonds to pay off this debt. And MERS is looking at whether they have the ability to do that on our behalf. So we're investigating those two options. And the difference, of course, would simply be, would raise that amortization, the years of the amortization to 20, 25 years, something like that, pay an equal amount over that time, pay it off now, and try to get ahead of the game that way with these low interest rates. So we're looking at both of those.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Mr. Chairman, I know this is an important discussion, but I'd like to remind you that we have Parks and Recreation interviews at 9:30.
Okay, we'll get this thing wound up. All right. Does that conclude your report, Dean, on that?
Yes.
All right. We've gone through administration, we have,
I have one quick thing. Commissioner Inman will not be able to be at the wellness luncheon on Friday, and so we have a couple of slots that need to be filled for cooking, 10:45 to 11:15 and 11:45 to 12:15. If any commissioners could fill those in, we would appreciate it. You can see me afterwards. And then the last thing is, the employees asked that if you're going to be cooking and you have oven mitts, barbecue mitts, if you could bring them along, because we don't have enough of those.
Okay.
That's it.
Cooking with Dicky is fun.
oh, yeah. All right. Any unfinished business? I see none. New business? Dennis, do we need to have any further discussions on the budget other than,
Nope, we're just going to
Right.
pass them on to you now, and that's kind of under the budget discussion.
all right. We will move on to second public comment. Chris, go ahead.
I had some budget questions for Dean.
All right.
And I was planning on doing it during budget discussion. And Dean, you probably can answer this off the top of your head. When you take a look at the Parks and Rec salary summary that I prepared, 58% into the year, we've used 80% of our budget for part-time temporary. We're also over on full-time. But our FICA, health insurance, life insurance, defined benefit, defined contribution, everything else is below target. Why is there such a discrepancy when we're above, so far above target on wages, we are so far below on our contributions?
The quick answer on that, and I hate to answer questions like this when I don't have the information in front of me, but benefits are posted at the end of the month. So things like health insurance, short-term disability, life insurance are going to lag a little bit depending on when you're looking at the numbers. I think I did look at those budget adjustments that we talked about. What are your numbers for the part-time and the full-time?
I took them off the spreadsheet that you gave me.
Okay. What was the date on the spreadsheet?
8/4.
8/4. We are tracking higher in personnel 703 and 702, and I've discussed that with Jason. When I looked at the part-time yesterday, we were at 71% of budget. And Jason, I believe we did make a line item transfer to cover from contract services.
That's my other question. You did take $13,000 out of, and you gave me that budget adjustment. You did take $13,000 out of contract services and put it into part-time temporary. But then the budget number changed for part-time temporary. The 2010 budget number changed.
It should increase by the 13,000.
It did. My question is, well, how do we, if you do this with this department, I'm assuming you do it with all the other departments. How do we see how departments are actually doing, actually performing regarding their initial budget if the budget numbers change?
Well, with that being a line item transfer, the total appropriation to Parks and Rec to pool did not change because that was moved from one line item up to personnel. We did talk about another option, and that was increasing pool revenues, which are coming in at a greater rate than they have. There's the potential to do that, but Jason and I did not feel that was a wise budget adjustment to make.
That's not my question. My question is, if you change the 2010 budget number, for instance, okay, it was $103,000 for 2010. You've added $13,000 to it. Now it shows that it's $116,000. How do we know when we look at these books, because those numbers have been changed, how do we know with these books how departments actually are performing?
Because the budget adjustments are adjusted in the printouts you get for the department where you see 2009, or 2010 adjustment.
That change in the budget should be reflected in the 703 line item in your budget report.
I think rather than just eat up the morning, I will get with you after the meeting.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that. Okay.
Just a couple comments on the
yes.
budget, just generally. You know, the schedule's included in here, the timeline. This budget is, you know, it's balanced. It has about a 6% reduction from this year. There are 39 layoffs proposed as a result of the budget. Most all the departments cooperated fully in trying to accomplish this. There were a few things that we had to do to make it balanced. So take the time you need to go through this and know that Dean and I are available. You now have about 3 weeks, I think, before our hearing so that you can have enough time to go through the budget in detail. Call us if you have any questions, and we'll be glad to talk to you about that. And then after we have the hearings with the departments, you'll have about another week to study it and prepare for the deliberations to make the cuts that are necessary. But it's a pretty complex document. If you go through it and there are other information that you need, please let us know, and we'll be glad to provide that to you.
And the pool amount for discretionary add backs is how much?
$750,000, and we put some options in there for you to look at. And that $2.8 million number that we used as the initial cut target, that did not include contractual obligations for increases. That raises that number up to, you know, considerably over $3 million that had to be cut, so.
All right, okay. You're all set on the initial budget issue? All right. Second public comment? Hearing none, we will close second public comment. Commissioner committee reports. Hearing none, you have notices and announcements in terms of the budget dates and times, and additional meetings as needed. Is there any other business before we adjourn? Commissioner Thomas.
That guy up on the screen, I can remember when he broadcast live, December 7th, 1941, that we were attacked.
Yeah, how about that?
Unfortunately, I remember it.
Yeah. Any other items?
That's actually fortunate. Some people don't.
Okay, we need a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
All right. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
I assume that the interviews